As we begin today's sermon, a lot of what I have been saying lately in my day-to-day life includes the term level up your faith. Maybe because I am the generation of the first in-home video games, with Atari and Nintendo being part of my daily activities as a child, there is something really powerful about this concept of leveling up. It comes with a challenge that seems to be exciting. It isn't actually draining. It is expanding my reach in whatever game I am all of a sudden playing. That we get to jump from the top of the Mario staircase onto that flag with one arm raised in the air, and I get to keep walking towards whatever the next level might bring. And do I get it perfect the first time? Most of the time, no. But slowly, I begin to gain more skills and more understanding with practice. And then finally, yes, I've completed that level. And leveling up is a big piece in my new business with Faith Tutors. It recognizes while we all might be playing similar games, we may be stuck on different levels. We may need different skills and items to get through the current level that we are on. That moment where we may need just a little more motivation or understanding. And there are often times when I'm playing a game that I get stuck. You can hear me yell if I'm in the middle of a game, "Hey Rob," my gamer husband, "I need your skill set and help." And every once in a while, he actually needs my skills. We have different skills, even when we are on the same levels playing the same games. Or that moment where you finally get through the hard part that you have been struggling to get through. And you're so excited that your game character dies because you didn't really know what was coming next. You were so focused on getting through that part. And I thought about this image as we continue to wander through the Lenten season with Peter. I mean, last week we talked about how Peter was called to take that boat into deep waters. This week, we're on a different level. We're called to go into the deep waters, but this time without the boat. In a possible storm coming, all of a sudden needing to level up. I wondered then if Peter would have been prepared for this challenge of faith, if he hadn't already had to experience the previous level of his journey. I mean, here we are back on the Sea of Galilee, a large lake with many little towns are located around the edges. This is a place that is familiar to Peter, but it still presents new challenges, especially in the face of this new connection with Jesus. And now Jesus, who has made us go deep in the first week of Lent, is saying it is time to level up Peter. And I think Peter honestly thinks he has got this. He can do it, and he does. He takes heart. He takes courage. He is emboldened. I would even say to probably the others, he seemed a little stupid. I mean, why are you stepping out of a boat? But Peter trusts, and he goes. And then something slightly falters. Something shifts. The wind picks up. A bit of doubt begins to creep in as the weather threatens to change. The moment has a physical obstacle that we know connects to the mental and spiritual obstacles in our lives. And this is the moment where the cry for help comes. The fear and the doubt set in, and Peter, like all of us, realizes he has not quite gotten it figured all out yet. As Gail shared last week in her lovely offering meditation, we are often willing to help others, but we're not willing to accept help. That there are stigmas that come when we admit we need help. And even in our faith, if we admit we may doubt, if we admit that we have questions, if we admit there is something we don't know or understand in all of the Bible, if we even admit we might be wrong, then all of a sudden we feel like someone is judging us and saying, you must be a bad follower of Christ. But Bryan McLaren argues the doubt is a passageway from one stage of faith to the next. In my words, this is the moment where our faith can level up. And Peter does not do this in the privacy of his own home. As I think of this story, don't forget the other disciples were still in the boat. One of them must have reported this story, and we are reading it still thousands of years later. And I can't see Peter being like, yay, I sunk. Instead, I am sure as he got back in that boat, he was full of all the different emotions. What happens when somebody finally sees you make it? You walk on water, but then 2 seconds later, you sink. What happens when someone watches you in a moment of weakness? What happens that moment you thought you had it, you think you have it, but you don't? I mean, I could see him getting angry even and turning and looking at those in the boat and say, well, let's see you try it. And those in the boat thinking, well, we didn't try it. We were staying in the boat. Or maybe you could then make excuses, or would you simply be willing to ask for help? Peter is starting to realize that he is going to be asking for help a lot. That he is constantly going to have to balance between being courageous and having moments of doubt. And if we are all honest, that is what we all do. And that we too are going to need both Jesus and even those who may have laughed at us slightly willing to let us back into the boat. There may have been a variety of reactions that Peter will have to face, and even that takes a different type of courage. That is why I think many people in churches don't get out of the boat. It isn't that they are worried that Jesus won't help them, but they are worried about what the others watching will say. Or maybe that's just me. I mean, I know in my life at the moment, I've been very vulnerable with many people as I've taken a big step of faith. But every once in a while, there's a part of my brain that definitely holds all of those negative thoughts and doubts that starts to want to make me sink. I mean, it is easy to sink, and it is hard to ask for help. And will we ask for Jesus' help? Are we willing to continue to trust that and name that we can't do things alone, that we will fail if we try to do things alone, even with a belief in Jesus? We need those to let us back into the boat as well. And while I do believe very deeply that God is in my new endeavor, I have doubt every day. It is really funny how much gratitude I have in Susan liking my post every day. Or that Faye, Aaron, and Andrea were able to be at the workshop last week. And all I feel like I've been doing lately is asking for help, showing my gratitude, asking people to share things. And I have to admit, it feels super awkward after a while. And yet I think of those who are forced to ask for help all the time in a world that doesn't want to give it, or we are willing to give help, but only at an arm's length. There's a shared video by Sanctified Art that I encourage you to watch called Love Beyond Walls. It is about a man, Mark, who was experiencing homelessness. Mark had been digging in the trash, and a neighbor was about to call the police. Mark had a business degree and at one point had owned his own home. But life happens. Sometimes we sink. As Dr. Lester says in his story description, sometimes we sink simply because we had the courage to show up. Other times we sink because we lose sight of what is crashing around us. So let us name that as Independence Christian Church, and as a community that believes in church in bigger ways, that we need to acknowledge that at some point we will sink. Take that in. At some point, we will sink. And if we think about it, there are probably points we have already. But do we sink because of courage or because we're losing sight of what is happening around us? Do we sink because we think we know exactly what to do now, or because the wind is shifting and that fear and doubt can easily set in? Are we willing to actually share that we are an imperfect church with a really imperfect pastor and imperfect members in an imperfect building, and still celebrate that we are stepping out even though we may sometimes sink? Are we worried about what those watching us will say? But let us remember then that those in the boat in other stories aren't as safe as they may seem either. They too, even in the boat, will have fear and doubt. Therefore, no matter where we sit or stand, the wind will rise, and we will still need Jesus to bring a real sense of peace in whatever uncharted waters are heading our way, and that Jesus is our way to level up. But only if we are willing to practice, only if we are willing to sink, only if we are willing to play. Are you willing to level up? Amen.